Hello, friends,
Welcome to the Liberation Chronicles. I'm Robin Parker.
and I'm Jorge Zeballos. This is another episode of the Liberation Chronicles, a series in which we hope to give voice to liberation in our current historical context and discuss what it means to build a truly inclusive society. Today, we have two very special guests, people that we've known for quite some time, Pamela Smith Chambers and Tilman Smith. Pam and Tilman are friends and colleagues of ours. Our discussion will focus on race stories, stories about race and how we share and welcome them. Don't forget to give us your comments about our episode in the comment section, like our video, and subscribe to our channel. And also give us suggestions for future people that we can interview regarding these topics.
It's great to have you both, Pam and Tilman. Thanks so much for coming here. I want to give our audience just a little introduction on you both. Pam is the Training Director Emeritus of the Beyond Diversity Resource Center. She worked with me and Jorge in the New Jersey Office of Bias, Crime, and Community Relations and was Director of Counseling and Education Services at the YWCA of Trenton, New Jersey, where she co-founded the Racial Justice Program. She also worked at Educational Testing Service on test fairness related to women and people of color. Also joining us is Tilman Smith, who has been an educator and project manager for over 35 years, serving as a classroom teacher, administrator, field supervisor, college instructor, caucus facilitator, trainer, and coach. She has facilitated workshops throughout the country on topics of anti-bias curriculum, white privileged, internalized sexism, internalized white superiority, and co-founded two community white caucuses in the Puget Sound area that supported educators and community activists for over 20 years. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So today, our guest, as I said earlier, will be sharing with us stories about race, things that they have experienced over their years in this work. And because race and racism are divisive topics in our society, we urge people to do more than just listen. Instead, we need to invite such stories, listen with open minds, and although we may ask the storyteller questions if we get permission. We should not engage in cross-examination, questioning with the purpose to attack or disprove their stories.
That's right, Jorge. Listeners are essential for the telling of any story. We, human beings, are truly storytellers, but storytelling is a mutual experience that requires sharing with others in our community. Indeed, it's a powerful way to understand the experience of others and to build friendships. We're suggesting that you practice mindfulness when you're listening to race stories. In her book, The Inner Work of Racial Justice, Rhonda Maggie says that mindfulness is, quote, paying attention on purpose with the attitude of friendly, open, non-judgmental curiosity and a willingness to accept what arises, close quote. Mindfulness is essential to developing the capacity to really hear race stories and not react to them as if we're on autopilot. In my opinion, one of the reasons we have so many challenges with race in our society is that we don't share race stories, or if we do, we don't know how to receive them. Our episode today offers examples of better race story practices.
With that in mind, let's take a pause before we have Pamela share her race story. And in this pause, we'll take a deep breath and remind ourselves of our intention to listen with care, kindness, and openness to the race story that Pam will offer. So now we would like to welcome Pam to share a race story.
Thank you, Jorge. I would like to share a story that happened around my plans to attend college when I was in high school. But in order to do that, I want to give you just a little bit of background about my family as well as about the school that I attended. I went to Trenton High School in Trenton, New Jersey, and I graduated in 1968. And while I was there, Trenton High School was considered one of the top 10 high schools in the United States. And it took great pride in the number of students that went to college. It also had a national model vocational technical school so that students who chose not to seek college educations were graduating completely prepared for careers in areas such as secretarial services, administrative assistants to medical personnel, working and even owning their own garages. Everything you could think of was covered in our VOTEC school. So our school was a national model of education at that time. My parents made a decision that I was going to go to college when I was born. I never participated in that decision. I was never even asked if I wanted to go. It was simply the message in our household, very powerful, that I, my brother, and my sister would go to college. How that would happen, we could never be sure of because we didn't have money. But there would be some way, and we would figure it out, and we would go. During my senior year in high school, like every other student who was college bound, we met with our advisors to start working on what would be our process to get to college. Um, for those of you who are old like I am, you'll remember that during that time, students were tracked. So from the time I entered seventh grade, junior high school back in the day, middle school now, I was tracked into college preparation courses, foreign languages, top level English courses, math courses that were terrifying, all levels of science courses, and I did well. I consistently had A's and B's, except in chemistry when my partner and I blew up a corner of the lab, which really affected our grades. But however, for my other grades, um, I I had all A's and B's, and that had absolutely nothing to do with the school. It had everything to do with Walt, my dad, and that was you didn't show up with grades lower because there were some serious consequences um, to answer to. Even a B would get a question from him. What happened? So we not only did we have very high expectations for performance in school, but we were going to go to college. That was just a given. Like every other student at the high school, 1,100 students plus in my graduating class. This is a very big. It was a very big school. Yeah. I went to see my guidance counselor, and all he's looking at my records, all college prep courses, because that was the plan. And he just looked at me. He actually had the nerve to look at me and say, I really think you should consider cosmetology as a career. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I just kind of sat there stunned. It was like, you have to go to college for that? I thought you could go to the VOTEC school and get started with that and then take special courses, which I finally did say to him. And he says, well, I don't know if you're really college material, and I'm not really sure. He kind of hemmed and hawed. Well, the first thing I did was I went home and told my dad, who came to school and made that conversation disappear. Basically, my dad was a wonderful advocate. He was a great father for daughters. He advocated for me all the time, as long as I was right. When I was wrong, that's a whole different podcast. But he was a serious advocate for all of his children. But particularly for his daughters in ways that were different. So he went and spoke to the guidance counselor, and as life would have it, I ended up going to college, getting an undergraduate degree in English and African American Studies, and getting a graduate degree in counseling. But when I think about what happened, every single time, a couple of things come to mind. Every single time I'm asked to think about a time when I was treated in a racist way, that story comes up for me. And it really makes me angry every time I rethink it or tell it. And I think because I think about me as a person, and granted, my college guidance counselor had a lot of students. And there wasn't a whole lot of time to know me personally. But you can ask the three people that I'm doing this with some things about me that are so obvious that when the idea of me being a cosmetologist comes up, they'll probably be laughing on the floor. They're laughing now. See, they know. Um, I, Doing people's hair was never anything that was the least bit of interest to me. My hair has been natural and short for 56 years of my life. And I did let it grow so that I could lock it. So it was still natural. Maybe I would have been able to progress in my career and become a cosmetologist for the stars. Who knows? But I know where my heart is. I love language. I love words. I love, I was the kid in seventh grade when they said, okay, we're going to diagram sentences. Kids don't even know what that is today. I was the one with the whole special notebook full of diagram sentences. I loved doing that. And some of my fellow students were like, you gotta be kidding. But I've always loved language. I spent 20 plus years working in African American theater, both at the college I attended and in my community. I was a stage manager, I was a director, I was an artistic director. I spent right around 25 years serving as a senior adjunct instructor at a community college in my area where I taught English comp. There's nothing that suggested anything about me being someone who does other people's hair. We found out later, many of the Black students at my school, that many of them had the same kind of racist experiences that I had. Although we loved our school, we still love our school, many of us. And we had a wonderful experience there. On another podcast, I'd love to tell you all about the concert choir that Trenton High had, which was known nationally. But and I loved all of that. I loved all the activities that I had there. I loved being there. I loved the friends I still have from my high school. But there was nothing about me that suggested that I would ever not go to college or have this kind of career except racism, straight up racism. And as time has gone on, even as recently as about a year ago, friends who went to the high school are still sharing stories about the racism that they experienced when they were students there. The school was 70% white, 30% students of color, most of whom were Black. And while on the surface it seemed like everything was just great, and we did have good experiences and we received excellent education, still under all of that was a very powerful current of racism that was redirecting and damaging the lives of the Black students who attended.
Wow. Yeah, Pam, there's no way I could see you as a cosmetologist.
I know.
That
I
just,
know.
yeah, right.
Look at
That
me.
just does not fit. And not only that, I mean, for me, Pam, is more about you are such a bright intellect that I can't imagine that you wouldn't use your brain in life. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful compliment.
But thank you for sharing your story. And I hope all of us kind of took it in the spirit that we try to set for the story. But now we want to transition to listen from you, Tilman. What story do you want to share with us?
Thanks, Jorge. Thanks, Pamela. That story really brought up a lot for me. I look forward to talking more about it. I have a lot of stories that I could have shared, And after talking with Pamela, this one popped up because, as an educator, of course, I always think of myself as not being able to be racist. I'm always so good at what I do and I care so deeply. But immediately this story popped up. Um, I For over about 10 years, I worked at a small college in Seattle, a branch of a main campus in California. I graduated from this college and I was really attached to it. This Northwest branch had been in existence for over 50 years, and the fact that I was able to work there was a dream for me. One of the reasons I loved this campus was because of its leadership and its vision to provide really cross cultural, anti racist education for all students. And this vision was integrated into everything we did by the fact that they moved the leadership from being mostly white women to predominantly being led and staffed by people of color. So everything I was doing there just fed this idea that I was a good anti racist and I was working in a great organization, a great college that supported these values. In this move towards hiring, we hired a dean, an African American woman, and then following her were more people of color, almost all holding PhDs, having immense knowledge and information. And I was kept on, luckily, as somebody who had an MA, less knowledge, less experience than any of these people who came on. So I was very lucky and very excited to be there. When this new dean was successfully hired, she was told that her very first task was going to be to fire me. Now, I didn't know this. And before doing so, she actually took me out to lunch. And we realized that we got along really well and that we really enjoyed one another. So after a couple more meetings, she actually told me that this was supposed to be her very first task. She also told me that she had decided not to do that, that she wasn't going to follow that order, that I was going to be able to stay, and that I should just move along as if this had never happened, and that we were going to be a great team together. So, what an amazing shock, followed by an amazing break. And I was completely indebted to her to be able to continue on in this job I loved. So I was student services mostly at the time. And a lot of our student services were still located in California. And because of our approach, allowing students to have more access and supporting them so much, there was a lot of tension between myself and the student services in California, with the intimation that we were admitting students that weren't qualified to be admitted and that we were doing so only because they were people of color. So they thought I was a real pain, and I thought they were cold and unhelpful and racist. And I got a lot of positive feedback for how I was advocating for our students and against racism. So as this dynamic continued, the college was hiring a new president. And the person they chose, now remember, our goal was to be anti racist, but the person they chose was a white, very wealthy, and politically connected woman with no college administrative experience at all. So we were puzzled and we were really concerned. We thought this just does not look good, or something's going on we don't understand. And absolutely within a year, she began inferring that our branch was not an acceptable part of the college, and that they couldn't afford to keep us on, and that she did not appreciate our unorthodox ways. So we understood that things were going to get more and more tense. Our dean, the woman who saved my job, constantly went down to California, constantly fought for us. She did it with so much grace, so much conviction, even though her full time job was still in Seattle and she had a family with 3 young children. So, I mean, she just remained our champ the whole way through. But within a very short time, this new president let us know she was going to shut down our campus. Uh, I was furious, and I was righteous in that fury. White women, we know how to be righteous, and I was right there. And I couldn't believe this stupid president was going to get away with shutting us down. Our campus called a meeting with her, the executive team, and the board members. And we were supposed to try to figure out if we could mitigate this from happening. In that meeting, feeling my full righteousness, I made a comment where basically I called her a racist. And she became irate. And I was still feeling myself when I caught the looks of all of my colleagues of color who, while they appreciated my intent, they realized that this was going to be devastating to our cause, because this gave her fuel to explain why she had to shut us down. Look how out of control we were. Soon after, it was a Monday morning, and our dean had just come back from California from an especially painful meeting with the people there. And she came back and she was defensive and tight and, just get away from me kind of vibe. And I should have been gracious and supportive and kind, but instead I took her to task, and I told her in a not nice way that I wasn't so sure she was fighting that hard for us or that smart enough for us. And I made it clear to her that I felt she could be doing more. And I was really disrespectful and really dismissive of her. In that moment, she looked away from me, and without a word, she walked away. So I knew something was up, but I still wasn't chastised enough from understanding what I had already done with the president. Now what I had done with the dean, I still was feeling my righteous self. But after a few hours, I went to go look for her, mostly to make myself feel better, to alleviate my guilt. And I found her in a far off room, and she had been crying. Now, this is a woman who was strong and pretty ferocious, and she did not cry easily, and certainly not in public. So the idea that I had done something to make her cry hit me pretty hard. And then she told me, I can take a lot. I expect attacks from the college, from the president, from the board, but never did I expect an attack from you. After everything we've been through, after everything I've done for you, after everything you've told us that you care about, and then you come after me after everything I've done. I was silent for a moment because, of course, she was right. Of course, What she said was right on. And I knew what I'd done was I just wanted her to make me feel better. I wanted her to make everything okay for me. And this overtook any sense of responsibility or humility or indebtedness I had to offer her. I mean, there was no hiding my internalized white superiority or my entitlement in that moment. Um, I'll say that we are still close, luckily, given her generosity. And we have woven this story into our friendship because it's so clear that at any moment, this is how things could turn. Um, just for your information, the campus was certainly shut down, and my righteousness and all of this did nothing to stop that. So it was about me and me wanting to feel comfortable and me wanting to feel like I was somebody.
Wow. Very, very powerful story, Tillman. I appreciate you telling it. And also, it reminds me of who you are. Because the way I've known you all these years, Tillman, you've always been someone that's been very willing to own your own stuff. And so just, your story just reminded me of that quality that you have. Thank you for that.
So
Thank you.
let's take a pause just for a moment. Take a deep breath and remember that we've just heard two stories about race. And we're pausing because stories about race, because race and racism are divisive issues, are ones in which often listeners don't listen well because we don't have practice. We may be ready to defend, we may be ready not to hear, we may feel afraid, we may feel guilty. There's a million reasons why. Every reason that makes race difficult to talk about and to deal with in our society are the reasons why hearing stories about race can be difficult. The pause will allow us to take a moment to recognize the humanity of the storyteller, of the intention of the story, of the emotion behind it, and potentially do something different than we otherwise would do. And so now that we've taken the pause, I've asked both Pam and Tilman, we have asked both Pam and Tilman, we could ask just a couple of questions about the stories. And the first one being, what was it like for each of you to share your race story right here, right now, knowing that it's going to be part of a YouTube video?
Well, at least for me, if you don't mind, Tillman, I mean, at least for me, it doesn't really get more comfortable. And given my work, it's something that I've practiced a lot, probably more than most people, right? But there's still some degree of discomfort. And for me, there are also all of the feelings that embody the experience at the moment, like being angry, being hurt, being disappointed, being confused, kind of come rushing back in that moment. Many years ago, when I had the experience, I would have to characterize that as overwhelming, and it's not that anymore at all. But at the same time, the ability to just detach from it and tell it from afar is an ability I've never cultivated.
I'm wondering, Pam, if it has something to do, maybe, in that moment, right? You're a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
You have this person in a position of authority, and most of the time, in that position, we just take it and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your dad went back in and kind of straightened things out,
Mm-hmm.
but you didn't.
Right.
So I'm wondering if part of it is that in a moment like that, since you didn't respond in a way to contest whatever story was being told about you, and that if you had been able to have some sense of agency in that moment, that maybe would have a different weight today.
That's a hard question, Jorge. I don't know, but I can speculate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it probably would. But
Mm.
let me just say this a tiny bit more context. I said I graduated in 1968. Martin Luther King was assassinated just 6 weeks before my graduation,
Mm.
and it changed my city forever,
Mm.
and it changed my school forever. But prior to that, there were a whole bunch of us who were very much part of the civil rights movement and, doing marches in the city and, advocating and all. So it wasn't, I would have to say, it wasn't my lack of awareness of racism.
Mm.
Like my father would never let me get away with that anyway. How? I mean, he was clear that he was Black and we were Black and that meant something and he shared that. But at the same time, um, I think it was just like the shock of something coming out so opposite of what it had been my whole life. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't, your question is really hard for me because I don't know if that I didn't have some agency. Um, and maybe if he had slipped and been a little more direct
Mm-hmm.
and hinted at it, I think I could have responded.
Mm-hmm.
But the way it came out so neutral, it was like, why, do you have the right student?
Mm.
Because he's also advising other students to do exactly what he asked me to do, right? So it's like, are you talking to the right person? And it wasn't until I went home and talked it over with my parents, and my father was 100% clear about what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And when he explained it to me, I was also very clear. But you're right, I was the kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And I don't know, right? Because I think, there's a way in which, when racism shows up in our lives, regardless of whether we have a comeback in the moment, we shut it down, whatever intervention we may be able to at some time, sometimes put into practice. I think the sting of a moment like that maybe never leaves.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I agree completely.
Mm.
Tilman, were you going to say anything in particular regarding Pam?
When you invited us to do this, I thought, oh, yeah, I've got this. I tell these stories often because it's part of the work I do and who I want to be. But strangely, I couldn't come up with the story for this podcast. And
Mhm.
it was when I was talking with Pamela, and she had shared her story that this story popped up for me, that it would be a helpful example of how race and racism have shown up in my life. I then, though, unlike Pamela, who I think Pamela is just telling this from her heart and from her memory and experience, I had to write my story down and I had to
Mm.
really think it through. And I had to really look at the cracks of where I was letting myself off the hook, which tells me that the amount of dissonance that this story causes between who I think I am as a person and how I act was allowing me to detach in order to maintain my sense of comfort. So, very different. Pamela speaking from the heart and memory and just being present, and me being a little bit more detached and cerebral in my approach. I uh, am just noticing that.
One of the things that strikes me about Pam's story is that we're dealing with a young adult, right? Someone who's graduating high school. And I'm not an educator, but I can remember what it was like to be young. And young people aren't always the smartest when it comes to, right? Where am I going? What should I do? And it can become especially difficult when people who are in authority, people who we're supposed to trust in some way, teachers, guidance counselors, principals, bus drivers, doctors, lawyers, you get the idea, react toward us in ways that are racist, but perhaps aren't obviously racist, right?
Yeah.
And so, we go, oh, what am I missing? What's going on? And I just wonder how many people who were subject to that same guidance counselor didn't have parents like Pamela's who intervened, right? And went home and said, well, it really would be good for me to be a cosmetologist, which is perfectly fine if that's what you wanted to do.
Exactly.
Right? There's nothing wrong with being a cosmetologist, but it runs counter to the notion of college prep, bottom line, and counter to grades that reflect readiness for college preparation and your own desires and your parents' desires. So that's the part that hit me with Pam's story.
I will say that I was in no way as smart as Pam, and my grades were no way reflected how I deserved to go to college. But when I went to my guidance counselor, it was assumed I'd go to college. Of course, I'd go to college, and I would shoot high, and I'd probably get in. So just such a different experience and expectation.
And Tilman, I wonder if this, of course, the stories are not a competition. Pamela's story is Pamela's stories, and your story is your story. And your story, takes place at a time in life when you were older. But it also, if I heard you, as I heard your story, I heard owning things that could produce guilt, or that you weren't particularly proud of. And that takes, recounting that story from my experience, one, takes a real sense of awareness, and two, a sense of bravery, because all of us like to tell the stories of where we have been subject to oppression or intervened. We are less likely to share stories where we should have done something and we should and we didn't, right? And that takes a certain amount of bravery. But I don't want to put the words in your mouth. Did you have any trepidations or feel like, oh, this is kind of embarrassing, I'm going to share it anyway, though?
Thanks for saying that, Robin. What I know is that you and Pamela and Jorge are always really generous with me as I share these stories. And there might be a degree of bravery, but what I've found over the years as I've tried to do this is that actually taking responsibility for these moments, these common moments in my work and private life, gives me such a sense of relief and alignment with my values, that helps me live with the embarrassment and the shame that I might feel. There's definitely shame and embarrassment. And at the same time, I figure, who am I kidding? I mean, whether I share these or not, the three of you or many people of color would be like, yeah, we saw what happened. The fact that you don't own it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And so by me owning it, it actually, yeah, it gives me a huge sense of relief because I'm not pretending to be something I'm just not.
As I listen to the stories, I think they have power for various reasons. But one of the obvious ones is that Pamela's reminds me of stories of racism as I was a child. Different circumstances, but I remember that. And so that's always helpful. And Tillman's um, was really useful to me because it reminds me that I'm not insane. Very often when I talk to allies, particularly allies who are not of color, people who are white, their view of the world is unracialized. They don't own very much around race. They don't see race as important. And Tillman's perspective is enlightening because it makes me feel like, oh, yeah, that recognition can transcend racial boundaries. Her view of what happened can be similar to mine, even though we're on different sides of the racial divide. But I'd like to open up the question to all of you, including Jorge. Some people might say, well, they're just stories. Right? So why are racial stories, race stories, as we have defined them, important in our society? And what purpose might they serve?
For me at least, being able to share a storytelling moment with Tillman, and have all those who are hearing me simply validate what I'm saying, as opposed to saying things like, oh, well, I was a white kid who went to that school, and, oh, my counselor didn't help me at all either, or, well, do you think that maybe he was mixing you up with another student, or had the wrong file, or, all those questions that come my way that are crazy making for me, that make me question my very sanity around my understanding of race. When that does not happen, I feel validated. And so it's a moment where my truth becomes the truth of those who are listening to me as well. And I'm very grateful when that happens. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's very uplifting. Because I know what happened to me and I know why. I wasn't born Black yesterday, so I know what I'm confronted.
I think they're important for this reason. Oftentimes, we have a training, we have a workshop, we have conversations about racism, and it's the big picture kind of racism, right? Historically it happened this way, and these are the things that were done and put in place. What we don't see reflected in that way of talking about racism is what happened on a day-to-day basis to people as they're trying to do life, right? Because then it just feels like it's just up here and nothing happens down here. But it's like, in fact, a whole lot is happening down here because of all of this, right? But again, normally we don't get to that level of investigation of, okay, as I navigate my day-to-day, what does it look like? So I think it personalizes that experience in a way, again, that telling the big picture stories don't quite get. And in doing that, then hopefully, right? I mean, for folks that are listening, they don't have that experience, can actually see the different ways in which racism can show up. Can show up in big ways, big policies, ways in which hundreds and millions of people get discriminated, don't have access to opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. But then it's like, as I'm walking into my day to day, you know, I'm in an elevator in a hotel, and a white man walks in. He's in his late 70s, maybe, and he says to me, "One," meaning I'm going to floor number one. You press the button for me, but there was none of the added language, right? To like, he felt that all he needed to say was one, and I would understand what he wanted from me. And I wasn't there to press buttons for anybody. Right? I'm right in the elevator with my suitcase to leave the hotel. Right, the same. Right. So it is, and then maybe also the fact that these things happen quite frequently. Right, they're not isolated incidents. So it's an isolated incident. Oh, Pam, that happened to you once. It's like that, and then this, and then that, and then maybe within the same day, I had like 3 things that happened. Right. So it is the ability again for me to flesh out in a very sort of at a very personal level.
Good point.
What racism can look like and feel like.
So good. Oh, that elevator story just sits. That's just such a what a clear example.
Oh
of
my
how
goodness,
whiteness
right?
shows up. Yeah.
The man didn't feel the need to explain anything, but just say a number and things would happen for him because I was standing right there. I miss the times that we would spend together like this, at conferences, wherever we were, right? So it's been a long time, as I was telling Tillman before, that I've seen her. I've seen you more recently, Pamela, but anyway, just thank you both first for being who you are, and then just for sharing your time with us to create this hopefully powerful podcast that folks can listen and learn from. So thank you for being here. To our audience, again, we invite you to like this video, to subscribe to our channel, and to give us suggestions about who you might want to see in the future. Or if you have any comments about what the conversation was today, we'd like to see that in the comments section. But we will see you next time, and thank you for being here again. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.